fantastic teachings on the subject. He's been a professor of real estate at UNT and has authored 15 books on the subject, which have variously appeared on bestseller lists in 12 countries, with some of his books being translated into 5 languages. He's taught at events in over 25 countries, including Tony Robbins' Wealth Mastery, and he wrote the book in the Rich Dad's Advisor series on real estate called Real Estate Riches, which was on the New York Times bestseller list for over 7 months, and that's quite impressive. He's passionate about the psychology of wealth in general and real estate in particular, and more than willing to share the fruits of his ongoing quest for knowledge, which he is going to do for us right now. Dr. Dolf.
Thank you so much for your warm introduction, Rebecca, and the enthusiasm with which you delivered it, because we have a saying that if you catch fire with enthusiasm, people come from miles around to watch you burn. And that's really the secret, that you've got to be passionate about what you do. Red hot is not enough. You've got to be white hot. Because when you're passionate about something, people catch the fever and you can create things that otherwise would never be created. I want to welcome everyone here, distinguished guests from all the consul generals from China, from Myanmar, from the Philippines, from Indonesia. Welcome. The Honorable Madame Fiona Ma, thank you for being here. It's great to see you again. I am so impressed. Did you catch what we were told? That Madame Ma was the first state treasurer to have a CPA. Right. What an absurd idea to have someone with a CPA to be state treasurer. I'm astounded that you were the first. That seems to me to be a logical fit. It concerns money. We're handling, I heard, 3 trillion and 200 billion of investments. Let's have people who understand what that means. Anyway, that's a diversion. And most of all, I want to thank you all for being here, because without you, there wouldn't be a Williams and Stephanie Foundation. Thank you for your support, for your contributions. And then talking about the foundation, thank you, Daniel and Ling, for running it, for spearheading it, for doing what you do, for being passionate about helping people in the Asian community in general, minority groups. I happen to know a little bit about minority groups. I've been a minority all my life in one way, shape, or form. My parents actually got married in Indonesia. They weren't from there, they were from the Netherlands originally. Then they moved to New Zealand. That's where my sister and I were born. I didn't learn English from my parents, which is just as well, because then I'd have a Dutch accent. I'd say things like, the other day I went to the front of the line. Yeah, like real Dutch people say. So I didn't learn English till I was 6. And then we moved to Europe. I went to school there. Then we moved to Australia. We were in Papua New Guinea. We were all over. I don't know where I'm from. I'm either a citizen of the world or a mutt. Both are valid. But it has given me a basis of understanding how there are differences around the world. And look at the world around us. We have different attitudes. Probably your attitudes are based on where you were born, right? Your geography. Because when 2 countries are in conflict with each other, and it pains me to see that conflict, because deep down we're all desirous of the same thing: a good life, good food, education for our children, the ability to travel and see a bit of the world. So I can't help but think that if 2 babies were swapped at birth in hospital and went home to the wrong countries with their parents, they would have the views of their adoptive country. So we've got to see through that and get rid of all conflict. And one of the best ways of getting rid of conflict is not to read books about each other, although reading is a lost art. We should all read more. Readers are leaders. He who does not read has no advantage over he who cannot read. If you don't read, you may as well be illiterate. In fact, if you want to improve your life, I have a suggestion I'd like to offer, which is take your TV and throw it out the window. If you want to save some money, I'm all for that. Open the window first, but get rid of the TV. TV is full of script writers' fantasies, which get you to engage long enough so that you will watch the advertisements, which are always 10 decibels louder than the program. Read books. With one book, $30 and 3 hours spent consuming a book, You can absorb the essence of someone's life if it's their biography or autobiography. So read more, travel more. When you go to other places, you see where they're coming from. And we don't do it enough. And that is one of my hobby horses, because everything you said, and by the way, Daniel and Ling, you never told me I was going to speak, you just told me to show up. So I heard I was in the keynote when you said, and our keynote speaker, I thought, oh, Fiona Ma's speaking, we're going to hear from the Consul General. And then who's the keynote? And then you mentioned my name. So anyway. But it's okay, because often when I get asked to speak somewhere, they ask me a couple of weeks beforehand, could we get a copy of your speech? And I say, there must be a mistake. I don't have a speech. And they say, why not? I said, because then I would know what I'm going to talk about. And at least by being spontaneous and extemporaneous, you get the real me. I haven't prepared something, by the way, a speech that I might have delivered, 3 months before at some other meeting. So it's all about being spontaneous. Everything you said was accurate, the real estate stuff, but my training isn't in real estate. I ended up doing a PhD in electrical engineering, and I worked on sonar systems. And we worked on medical devices, the first non-invasive heart monitor, and then we ended up working on military sonar systems to find mines that no one else could find. So that's my background. But then I never worked a day as an engineer. And people have often said, did you waste 8 years at university getting a PhD in electrical engineering? And you might wonder that. And my answer is no. I didn't waste 8 years learning facts and figures. I spent 8 years coming up with creative solutions to real world problems. And now, how can we apply them to the problems that interest us? And I acknowledge that, I even mentioned to someone before that California, were it a nation, would have the 5th largest economy. So I stand corrected to find out that it's now 4. It's jumped up a position. So that is very impressive, and on the basis of that alone, we could all say, well, let's rest our laurels and bathe in the glory of having the 4th largest economy in the world. But I always like to think, is there room for improvement? How can we improve things? And by the way, I've had the privilege of speaking and traveling with some of the most notable people there are. Jim Rohn, if anyone knows that name, we used to tour Asia together, Brian Tracy, and Tom Hopkins, Tom Peters, you name it. And Zig Ziglar is the one who said, and I love this, that you can get whatever you want in this world as long as you help enough other people get what they want. And that's what Daniel and Ling, of course, are doing by having the foundation. So part of my mission is to figure out, how can I use what I've absorbed, the ability to solve problems, hopefully in a creative way, and the fact that I've moved around a bit, how can we contribute to helping people? And the thing that really strikes me is, despite our good economy, and the United States has the biggest GDP in the world in total, of course, but also in terms of per capita, but we're not very good at some things. And one of the things we're not that great at is at exporting. In Europe, everyone exports. You can't travel in a straight line for 200 miles, or over there to be even 200 kilometers, without crossing a border. Whereas here, the country's so vast, we don't tend to think that way. We don't speak other languages. We have the lowest propensity to speak other languages. So we also have a very low propensity to export. And I want to bombard you with some numbers before I finish. And that is, in the United States, there are about 100 million companies, and yet fewer than 1% of them export. That's only 1 million. And of those who do, they export, 80% export to Mexico, Canada. It's a road trip. So that leaves 20% of 200,000 that export internationally. Now, some of the big ones are great. Microsoft, Apple, you name it. They're massive exporters. But the small companies, the family-run business, 5 employees, 10, 20, they tend not to do it that much. And yet every time one of those 200,000 companies export, the value of the US dollar goes up. It benefits everyone. So I can't understand that. And yet, by comparison, the Super Bowl in February was watched by 115 million people, none of whom benefited whether Team A won or whether Team B won. So just think of the numbers. 115 million people watch a game where there's no benefit to anyone other than pure hedonism, and I'm in favor of hedonism, but there was no financial benefit depending on which team won. And yet only 200,000 companies export, and we all benefit. So my catchphrase in this industry is, if Americans could put as much effort as they currently put into sport, into export, we would all be better off. So my mission is to help people export. And we've taken people on targeted missions to 23 countries. I got called by the State Department, and I honestly thought I was in trouble. What have I done wrong? Which rule that I wasn't aware of have I violated? And they said, we are so enamored with what you're doing. We want to put the resources of our trade commissions and embassies at your disposal to help what you're doing. So we have these resources, and my offer to you and my challenge to you is, what can we do to increase our ability to export? Because then maybe we could go from number 4. Who was number 3? I don't want to offend anyone. Japan. I didn't hear any representative of the Consul General of Japan. Maybe California could become number 3. Actually, having said that, I loved Japan as a kid. I learned the language. I have the dubious distinction not only of importing cars from Japan, I'm one of the few that's exported cars to Japan. That's a rare thing. And you can always think, how can we do this differently for a benefit? And the challenge is, many people think they have an open mind when it's merely vacant. There's a big difference. The trick is to sit down, read more books, talk with people, travel to other countries, meet with them, see what their needs are. Because remember, you can get whatever you want in this world as long as you help enough other people get what they want. Thank you all for being here. I think you recognize the value of what the William and Stephanie Foundation does. Let's continue the work, no matter how good we are. Let's see what we can do better. There's always room for improvement, constant and never-ending improvement. With that, I want to acknowledge you all. Thank you, Rebecca, for your kind introduction. And I look forward to